The incident occurred at 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in the designated handicapped parking area of the West Haven Veterans Affairs Medical Center. The subject, Caleb Hayes, a 38-year-old black man and decorated Army veteran, was parked legally in his government-issued vehicle while reviewing sensitive case files. He was approached by Officer Rick Jennings of the City Police Department, who, without cause, initiated a hostile confrontation. Officer Jennings accused Mr. Hayes of feigning a combat-related disability to resist a lawful order. Despite Mr. Hayes's repeated attempts to explain that he was a partially paralyzed federal investigator with the VA's Office of Inspector General, Officer Jennings escalated the encounter. He forcibly removed Mr. Hayes from his vehicle, mocked his severe limp as an act of defiance, and when Mr. Hayes struggled to maintain his balance due to the rigid carbon fiber braces locked around his legs, Officer Jennings applied a chokehold, cutting off his airway while accusing him of faking his paralysis. The encounter ended only when the officer's partner discovered Mr. Hayes's federal credentials and his Purple Heart military identification, revealing the catastrophic error in judgment that would ultimately destroy a 15-year career in law enforcement and trigger a federal investigation. This is the body cam footage, the witness testimony, and the moment a hero was treated like a criminal in the very place he had sworn to protect. The blue and red lights painted the interior of the dark sedan in silent, strobing bursts. Caleb Hayes didn't notice them at first. His focus was absolute, narrowed down to the lines of text glowing on the tablet in his lap. The case was a tangled mess of prescription fraud, a physician at this very VA hospital allegedly diverting opioids from the pharmacy, selling them, and leaving veterans, his brothers and sisters in arms, to suffer through withdrawal or seek relief on the streets. It was the kind of betrayal that coiled in Caleb's gut like a snake. He'd lost half of his team to an IED outside Fallujah. He'd woken up in Landstuhl with no feeling below his waist and a decorated future replaced by a lifetime of pain management and mechanical assistance. He did this job, investigating the rot within the system, because he refused to let their sacrifices be tarnished by petty greed. A sharp, authoritative rap on the driver's side window shattered his concentration. Caleb blinked, the words on the screen blurring as his eyes adjusted to the sudden intrusion. A flashlight beam pinned him in his seat, a blinding white circle that erased his features and turned him into a silhouette. Beyond the glare, he could make out the shape of a police officer, hand resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. Caleb's training, both military and federal, kicked in instantly. Stay calm. Show your hands. De-escalate. He placed the tablet face down on the passenger seat and slowly raised his hands, palms open and visible. He pressed the button to lower the window, the quiet hum of the motor a stark contrast to the sudden pounding of his own heart. Evening, officer, Caleb said, his voice even. The officer leaned down, his face a mask of suspicion. He was a white man in his late 40s, with a thick neck and eyes that seemed to have already reached a verdict. The name tag on his uniform read Jennings. License and registration. Jennings barked, the words clipped and devoid of any courtesy. What are you doing here this late? Just finishing up some work, officer. I'm a federal investigator with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Caleb gestured with his chin toward the building. This is my office. In a manner of speaking, he kept his movements deliberate as he reached for his wallet in the center console, acutely aware of the officer's tense posture. Jennings's flashlight beam followed his hand, a silent accusation. Everyone's got a story, the officer grunted, unimpressed. Let's see the license. Caleb handed over his driver's license. He purposefully did not yet present his federal credentials. That was an escalation card, one you didn't play unless you had to. Leading with it could be seen as a challenge, an attempt to pull rank. Right now, he was just a citizen complying with a request. Jennings took the license and shined his light on it, then back on Caleb's face, comparing the two. Caleb Hayes, you live across town. What kind of work has you sitting in a dark parking lot at this hour? The implication was clear, slathered in a thick coat of racial stereotype. A black man in a hoodie in a car at night meant one thing to this cop. As I said, I'm an investigator, Caleb repeated calmly, refusing to take the bait. I was reviewing a sensitive case file before heading home. This is a handicapped spot, and my placard is visible. I'm legally parked. I'll be the judge of that, Jennings sneered. He took a step back, his radio crackling to life. He spoke into it, rattling off Caleb's name and date of birth. A younger officer, who had been standing back by the patrol car, now approached, his expression more hesitant, less certain than his partner's. While Jennings waited for the dispatcher's response, his eyes roamed the interior of Caleb's car, searching for a pretext, a reason to validate his suspicion. He saw a gym bag on the back seat and a half-empty bottle of water. Nothing. The radio crackled again. Dispatch to 3, Adam. 4, subject is clear. No wants or warrants. He's got a CCW. Jennings's eyes narrowed. Concealed carry permit, huh? You armed tonight, Mr. Hayes. I am a credentialed federal officer. I am always armed, Caleb stated, his tone remaining flat. My service weapon is holstered on my right hip, in accordance with federal law. This information seemed to agitate Jennings rather than reassure him. The confirmation of a weapon, even a legal one, solidified his internal narrative of danger. Step out of the vehicle, Jennings commanded, his voice now a low growl. Hands where I can see them. A cold knot of dread formed in Caleb's stomach. This was the pivot point, the moment a routine stop could spiral into something irreversible. Getting out of the car wasn't simple for him. It was a process, a careful sequence of movements that involved his cane, his hands, and the intricate system of braces hidden beneath his jeans. Rushing it could lead to a fall, or worse, damage to the very equipment that allowed him to stand. Officer, I am happy to comply, Caleb said, choosing his words with surgical precision. However, I need to inform you that I have a combat-related disability. I am paralyzed from the waist down. I require the use of leg braces and a cane to exit the vehicle. I need to move slowly. Do you understand? Jennings stared at him, a smirk twisting his lips. It was a look of profound, dismissive disbelief. Oh, a disability? How convenient. I've heard that one before. Now, I'm not going to ask you again. Get out of the car. Now the younger officer, Brady, shifted his weight, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. He glanced at Jennings, then back at Caleb, caught in the gravitational pull of his senior officer's aggression. Caleb took a deep breath, steeling himself. He knew this was a dangerous precipice. I am not refusing your order, officer, he said, his voice dropping, taking on a harder edge of authority he'd hoped to avoid. I am informing you of a medical reality to ensure both your safety and mine. If I am forced to move too quickly, I will fall. My legs do not work on their own, Jennings laughed. A short, ugly bark. Save the sob story. You're resisting. That's what this is. A failure to comply. He reached for the door handle. Last chance, Hayes. Get out, or I'm pulling you out. Caleb knew he had no choice. He braced himself, planting his hands on the door frame and the center console. Okay, officer. I'm coming out. Just give me a second to get my cane. He reached beside his seat for the carbon fiber cane, but before his fingers could close around it, the car door was ripped open. Jennings's thick hand clamped down on his arm like a vice. Time's up, he snarled, and hauled Caleb out of his seat. The world tilted violently. Caleb's legs, locked in their rigid braces, were not prepared for the sudden, awkward angle of the forced exit. His left foot snagged on the door sill, and his entire body pitched forward. Without his cane, his balance was non-existent. He would have collapsed onto the asphalt if Jennings hadn't been holding him up, his arm twisted painfully behind his back. The shove against the side of his car was brutal. The cold metal shocked him through his hoodie as his chest and face slammed into the vehicle. Pain flared along his spine, a familiar, sickening fire. You want to play games? Jennings hissed in his ear, his breath hot and sour. We can play games, Caleb grunted, trying to find his footing. His legs, stiff and uncooperative, scraped against the pavement. The resulting gait was a clumsy, pronounced limp, a grotesque shuffle that was his daily reality. See that? Jennings said, yanking him upright only to slam him back against the car. He was speaking to his partner now, a performative display of control. He's faking a limp. Classic resistance tactic. Thinks it'll make us go easy on him. Officer, I am not faking, Caleb gasped, the impact having knocked the wind out of him. My spinal cord was severed by an IED. These braces are the only thing holding me up. You keep doing that, and you're going to cause serious injury. The plea was met with derision. Jennings shoved a knee into the back of Caleb's thigh, trying to force him to spread his legs. The brace held firm, an unyielding shell of metal and carbon fiber. This only infuriated Jennings more. He interpreted the mechanical resistance of the brace as active defiance from Caleb himself. "Spread him. You think you're clever, don't you?" he yelled, his voice echoing in the deserted parking lot. A car slowed as it passed on the nearby street, its occupants turning to watch. A woman walking her dog on the far side of the lot stopped, her hand going to her pocket, her phone emerging. They were becoming a spectacle. "I physically cannot spread my legs any further, officer," Caleb said through gritted teeth. The pressure on his back was immense. "The brace is locked at a fixed angle, lies," Jennings roared. He wrapped his arm around Caleb's neck, forearm pressing hard against his windpipe. "You want to resist? I'll show you what happens when you resist me." The world began to shrink, the edges of Caleb's vision going dark and fuzzy. The flashing police lights blurred into a meaningless smear of color. Air. He needed air. The officer's arm was a band of steel, crushing his larynx. He could hear a faint, panicked voice. It was Brady, the junior officer. "Rick, easy. What are you doing?" His face is turning purple. But Jennings was lost in his own rage, fueled by a perceived challenge to his authority. He's faking it all. The limp, the resistance. He's a goddamn actor. Caleb's training screamed at him, but his body was failing. He was losing consciousness. His hands, which had been pressed against the car, scrabbled uselessly at the cold metal. He had one last resort, one final gambit before he blacked out completely. With the last of his oxygen, he forced out a few choked words, his voice a ragged, desperate whisper. "Jacket, pocket. Brady." He couldn't turn his head, but he prayed the younger cop was listening, that some shred of reason remained in this chaotic, violent encounter. "Get my ID." The pressure on his throat was immense, a crushing weight that promised oblivion. He could feel his own strength fading, the fight draining out of him as black spots danced in his eyes. He wasn't going to die in a VA parking lot at the hands of a cop who thought his paralysis was a street corner magic trick. He refused. He focused all his remaining will on the younger officer, the one who had shown a sliver of doubt. The choking sound from Caleb was animalistic, a raw fight for life that seemed to finally penetrate Jennings's rage-filled haze. Or perhaps it was Brady's increasingly frantic warnings. "Rick, let him go. You're going to kill him. Let him go," Brady shouted, moving closer now, his hand on Jennings's shoulder. The pressure lessened just enough for Caleb to drag in a desperate, burning gasp of air. He sagged against the car, his head swimming. He said his ID is in his jacket," Brady said, his voice trembling slightly. "Let's just check it. Let's just see." Jennings, still breathing heavily, his face flushed with anger and exertion, hesitated. He looked at Caleb, then at the growing audience, the woman with the phone, now clearly recording, and another car that had pulled over to watch. The optics were turning disastrous. "Fine," Jennings spat, releasing the chokehold but keeping a firm, painful grip on Caleb's arm. "You check. It's probably a fake library card," Brady, looking relieved to have a task, carefully reached into the inside pocket of Caleb's jacket. His fingers closed around a stiff leather wallet. He pulled it out, flipping it open. He froze. The flashlight from his own belt illuminated the contents, and the color drained from his face. He stared at the wallet for a long second, then another, his mouth slightly agape. He looked up at Caleb, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Rick," Brady whispered, his voice barely audible. "Oh my God, Rick. Stop. Just stop." Jennings, annoyed by the dramatic pause, snatched the wallet from his partner's hand. "What is it? A security guard badge?" He shined his own light on it. And then he saw it. He saw the gleaming gold shield embossed with an eagle, and the words printed in stark, official font. United States Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Inspector General. Below that, Caleb's picture and his title, Senior Special Agent. It was a federal badge, a real one. Jennings's mind stuttered, unable to process the information. This wasn't some low-level dealer. This was a federal agent. A Fed. He frantically flipped to the other side of the wallet, searching for something, anything, to disprove it. Instead, he found Caleb's military ID card. He saw the rank, Sergeant First Class, retired. And then he saw the designation printed in bold red letters next to it. Purple Heart. The two words hit him like a physical blow. Purple Heart. Paralyzed. Combat disability. It was all real. The limp wasn't an act. The braces weren't a prop. The man he had just choked, the man he had accused of faking his injuries for 15 agonizing minutes, was a combat-wounded veteran and a federal law enforcement officer. The entire foundation of his authority, his righteous indignation, crumbled into dust. He looked from the ID in his hand to Caleb's face, truly seeing him for the first time. He saw the exhaustion, the pain, and the cold, unwavering fury that now burned in his eyes. The smirk was gone from Jennings's face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated panic. "Sir," Jennings stammered, the word foreign and clumsy on his tongue. He let go of Caleb's arm as if it were electrified. "Sir, I didn't. There's been a misunderstanding." Caleb didn't respond immediately. He leaned heavily against the car, his chest heaving as he fought to regulate his breathing. His throat felt like it had been scraped raw with sandpaper. He methodically pushed himself upright, his movements stiff and deliberate. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and raspy, but it carried an undeniable weight of command that eclipsed anything Jennings had projected. "Officer Brady," Caleb said, ignoring Jennings completely, "call your supervisor to this scene immediately. Then call for a paramedic crew. I have been assaulted, and I intend to press federal charges." Brady, looking pale and shaken, fumbled for his radio, his hands shaking so badly he could barely key the microphone. "Dispatch, send a supervisor and a bus to our location." Expedite." Jennings was backpedaling now, literally and figuratively. He held his hands up in a placating gesture, his face a mess of sweat and fear. "Sir, please, let's just talk about this. I was just doing my job. You didn't identify yourself. I identified myself as a citizen with a disability, and you chose to assault me." Caleb cut him off, his voice like ice. "You choked a paralyzed veteran in a handicapped spot in front of the hospital where he receives his care. There is nothing to talk about. Your actions, Officer Jennings, will now be the subject of an official investigation. Multiple investigations, in fact." The wail of an approaching siren cut through the night. A second patrol car, this one with a sergeant's stripes on the sleeve of the driver, pulled up, its headlights washing over the tense scene. A portly, gray-haired sergeant stepped out, his face etched with concern as he took in the tableau. Two of his officers, a civilian leaning against a car who was clearly in distress, and a small crowd of bystanders with their phones held up like digital torches. "What the hell is going on here, Jennings?" the sergeant demanded, his eyes darting between his officer and Caleb. Before Jennings could stammer out a self-serving explanation, Caleb pushed himself off the car and took a single, stiff step forward, holding up his open wallet. "Sergeant, my name is Special Agent Caleb Hayes, Office of the Inspector General. Your officer, Officer Jennings, just assaulted me after I informed him of my service-connected disability. He refused to listen, pulled me from my vehicle, and choked me, accusing me of faking my paralysis. Fortunately, his partner and several concerned citizens were here to witness it." The sergeant's eyes widened as he saw the federal credentials. He looked at Jennings, whose face had gone ashen. He looked at Brady, who was avoiding eye contact with everyone. He looked at the woman who was still recording, her expression one of grim satisfaction. He was a veteran of the force, and he could smell a career-ending lawsuit from 100 yards away. This one smelled like a thermonuclear bomb. "Jennings," the sergeant said, his voice dangerously quiet, "give me your weapon. Now, Brady, you get in my car. You're going to be writing a report for the next 10 hours. Jennings looked stunned, his hand hovering over his holster. "Sarge, I can explain." "There is no explanation, Rick," the sergeant exploded, his voice cracking like a whip. "You put your hands on a Fed? A wounded vet? Are you out of your damn mind? Hand me your weapon and your badge. You're on administrative leave, effective immediately. Do not say another word." Defeated, Jennings unbuckled his gun belt and handed it over, his movements robotic. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire life burn down in front of him. The paramedics arrived, their red and white ambulance pulling in behind the supervisor's car. They approached Caleb cautiously, their expressions professional but concerned. "Sir, are you okay? What happened?" one of them asked. "I was choked," Caleb said, his voice still hoarse. "I have a severe spinal cord injury. I need you to check for any damage to my neck and spine." As they began their assessment, taking his blood pressure and checking his pupils, Caleb's gaze drifted over to Jennings. The officer was being guided into the back of his own patrol car, no longer an enforcer of the law, but a subject of its consequences. The transfer of power was absolute, brutal, and complete. The video, as expected, went viral within hours. Spliced together from the woman's cell phone footage and, later, the leaked bodycam video from Officer Brady, it was a horrifying spectacle. The news outlets called it justice for the agent. Online commentators were less forgiving. Their fury, a digital firestorm. Officer Jennings was fired before the week was out, his union's perfunctory defense melting away in the face of such damning evidence. The city's police chief held a press conference, offering a public apology to Special Agent Hayes and the entire veteran community. The Department of Justice launched a civil rights investigation into the department's practices. Caleb filed his lawsuit, not for the money. He directed that any settlement go to a charity for disabled veterans, but for the principle. It was a formal, legal declaration that what had happened was not just a mistake, but a symptom of a deeper sickness. Weeks later, Caleb sat in his actual office, a small, functional space within the VA building, looking out the window at the very parking spot where his life had almost been extinguished. The case he had been working on that night had been cracked. The corrupt doctor was in custody, his network dismantled. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. His neck still ached, a constant, physical reminder. But the deeper ache was emotional. He thought about the reveal, the moment Jennings saw the badge and the Purple Heart ID. The officer's terror wasn't born of remorse for his actions, but of fear for his career. He wasn't sorry for choking a man. He was sorry for choking the wrong man. Caleb's status, his credentials, his medals, they had been his shield. They had saved him. But what about the others? What about the black man in a hoodie who was just a plumber, or a teacher, or a student? The one who didn't have a federal badge in his wallet? The one whose limp wasn't from a decorated combat injury, but from a childhood case of polio? What happened to him when he was pulled from his car and accused of faking it? There was no supervisor rushing to his aid, no federal investigation launched on his behalf. There was just the cold asphalt, the crushing weight of a knee on his neck, and the terrifying realization that his life was worth less than an officer's fleeting suspicion. The system had been forced to respond to him, but the system itself remained unchanged. His vindication was not a sign of justice, but an exception to the rule. He picked up a new case file from his desk, the details of another betrayal, another veteran in need. He got to work because that was all he could do. Fight the battles he could win, and hope that one day, a man's humanity would be all the credentials he ever needed.